Um, I will be running the tech for this class. And this is what it means. So we are so fortunate to have Bruce and Babette doing our tech stuff, which means that I am like hands-free. I don't have to let anyone in the room. I don't need to, monitor whether there's strange people trying to get into the room or anything like that. I don't deal with the recordings, but that's going to change on Tuesday. So what that means for me is that teaching the class and also monitoring I'm just gonna wait for a couple more people to come in because this will probably be more apt for them to listen to rather than for you guys who are here early. All right. As of Tuesday, I will be running tech for the class. What that means is that it would really be helpful for myself and for the rest of the group, those people who are here at 9 o'clock, for us to start at 9 o'clock or as close to 9 o'clock as we can get. I won't start before, but I definitely don't want to push the class to start at like 9:05, 9:06. What that also means is that I have to keep my eyes peeled for I don't know if you've ever hosted a Zoom call before, but there's a waiting room and people just kind of pop up and you have to let them in. The other day that happened, someone came into a class, I don't know, I think I want to say like 9:20, and I was really not paying attention because I was teaching. And then I got a message from Jesse saying, someone's trying to get into the room, can you let them in? Of course, I felt badly about it. At the same time, 9:20 is a little late to come into a class. And I imagine that if we were live, it would kind of be one of those things where you're like, do I come in, do I not come in at this point? So what we're going to be doing is we are going to have, we're going to lock the room at some point. And I think that that's some point that we're going to lock the room, which means that I don't have to worry if someone's outside of the room. It's no longer my problem. And I hate to be kind of like to say that, but I think you all understand the gist of that. So I think we're going to call it, I'm trying to be on the other side of it and say at 9:10, the room is closed. If you're coming in late after 9:10, then watch the recording. Like, then take responsibility for coming in late and just be like, well, I didn't make it in this time. What you can do also is if you feel like you're not going to be present, like you can't be in the camera ready for 9 o'clock, log in anyway. The room is open 15 minutes before the class starts, generally speaking. And I will do that when I run the tech. I'm going to open the room hopefully at 8:45, 8:50 the latest. The room is open, meaning that if I see you, I'll let you guys in and you could just be with a black screen. You don't need to have your face on the screen. You can have your coffee, do your thing. But once you're in the room, you're in. There isn't going to be an opportunity for you to get locked out, if that makes sense. So if you're up, set an alarm, be like, I don't know if I'm going to make it in. Get into the room, do what you need to do, come back and join us, turn your camera on when you're ready. Okay, and that might also help to mitigate this whole thing of like having to let people in. And as you see, people are coming in now, it's 9:05. And so what that also means for us is we're basically losing 5 minutes of class time, and the class is only 50 minutes this time around. It's not a full class. It's not a full hour. And so all of that means you guys are not getting, you're not getting your worth, your time's worth. And I'm not getting my time's worth with you. So that's my spiel. I hope that was clear. Any questions about it? And P.S., if you're going to come in late, if you are missing a class, Sharon, I'll get you in just a second. If you know that you're going to be late or missing a class, let me know in advance. And then I'll be like, oh, Sharon's going to come in, at 9:10. I'm just going to make that one exception. I don't want that to be the regular, but things happen, and I get that. We all have stuff happening. Sharon, question or comment?
It was a comment. Like even with my little kids, I make my 4th and 5th grade. I pick a different one every day to be a co-host, and they let the people in.
The problem with that, and I think that's a great idea. The problem with that, and I think Babette, you can attest to it. Do you want to address that as the?
I understand what you're all trying to do, and I really do appreciate all of that. The problem really is security. It really is, especially for this synagogue. It has always been about security. And so I think it would be great if somebody could tech, but it truly takes somebody dedicated just watching that. I don't just sit here and let people in. I'm constantly trolling. I'm constantly asking questions. I'm constantly reaching out to people in waiting rooms, rename your device. The minute you enter, I'm watching you. It's not just letting people in the room. That's not what this is about.
Yeah, and in
Okay,
addition
so-
to like being the staff of a CBST staff, you kind of are like, I'm responsible. If something does happen, God forbid, it's on the buck stops with me, and then that's my problem if something happens. And we would never want or expect that of our congregants,
Exactly.
and that, and you know what I mean, like that. It just kind of. But Sharon, I think that that's such a generous and thoughtful solution.
We have, I give them a list of who can come in. They don't just let anyone.
No, I
They
understood.
have a
I
list.
understand.
Understood, but I think-
but
I
if
understand.
something were to happen,
Yeah,
And it's on her.
let's
on me,
wrap
'cause
this
I
up.
let it
Stu, do you
happen.
want to, one more comment, and then we're gonna start Hebrew. Like, I think
I
we're
have
all,
a request.
yes.
Yeah, it would, okay, I have a class on 2 days a week. Well, it's actually for the other one. But anyway, I have a class prior to the 9 o'clock
Ow.
on Mondays, actually. So, but I have a class prior on Mondays. Is it possible that it starts at 8:30? Is it possible to open the room just before 8:30 so I can get on just before 8:30?
I mean, I can't promise that. That's too early, to be honest. That means that I'm not paid that much to get up that early, to be honest. But I'll say if you're coming in, if you come in before 9:10, like come in before 9:10. Yeah. I mean, I think we're all on the same page. We all want to make the most out of the time we're here, and none of us want to kind of be just like, waiting for other people. And I think that that's kind of like in life, a kind of annoying thing to be like, you said you'd meet me for coffee at 9, it's like 9:45. I am so done. Like, no one wants that feeling. And obviously we're all here for the same, and again, like there are people who wake up really early to be here, Lori, right? Like that. So let's respect that as well. And again, if you miss a class, it's not the end of the world. Like, we're doing this twice a week. It's recorded. You can come to me privately, say, hey, Amy, I missed blah, 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 missed this. Can you help me with, right now we're doing a review anyway. So everything we're doing right now. Okay, moving on. See, now it's 9:10. So now we're officially, I'm not gonna lock the room because I didn't say I would. So starting next week, room gets locked at 9:10. Just try to be here on time. Okay, how's everyone doing? So let's begin. As I said, if you have any questions or anything came up for you, and I'm going to be very mindful of how quickly I speak, because of some feedback I got was that I speak very quickly. So I am going to try to be mindful. If I start to go quickly and talk too fast, you can just kind of do this. You could just kind of be like, can you please just speak a little quieter? And I will be happy to do that. Okay, questions. Michael, I'm looking at you. No, I'm just kidding. Does anyone have any questions that they have about anything we looked at on Tuesday, and that we want to go over before we just go right back into that review? So we landed on chapters 1 and 2. No, yes, no? Okay. All right, so if no one, and one thing I'll also remind you all that you might not remember to mute yourselves just for ambient sounds. And this is not, actually nothing's happening now, but just keep that as a reminder in the back of your head that, everyone can hear everything all the time. So just keep that in mind. All right, so we are gonna go back to our review, and we landed on chapter 2, and I think we finished chapter 2, right? We did the O sound. We reviewed that we had done the O sound, and we are now, I believe, ready for chapter 3, which has a lot more stuff going on in it, including our favorite, the dagesh, the dot inside the letters. So let's do the share screen back to our beautifully colored slides, where we will look at a review of chapter 3. Let me close some windows. Okay, here we go. Chapter 3 review. Okay, so we have
page number, please.
I'm sorry, it's on the slide, page 20. It's on the slide. See it? It says page 20, chapter 3 review. Right over here. Okay, so beginning on page 20 is where chapter 3 starts. And we are introduced to the letters Hey and Daled, which is right over here. Hey and Daled kind of resemble one another in that Hey has just a little leg added to a Daled if we were to look at it like that, right? We've got Dalet has like a little edge to it, like a diving board, right? That was our little mnemonic last time. And hey kind of looks like the Dalet minus the little diving board edge. So basically just a straight line and then a little leg like that. That's our hey. Hey, we said was the breathing letter. There's like a little hanging piece or a little opening there. So it's nice to remember the hey as the breathing letter. The other interesting thing about the letter hey is that it is vocalized inside a word, the beginning or the middle of a word, and then it is silent at the end of a word. Such as, what word do we know that ends with a hey? Many words end with heys.
So it says the resh, not the dog, not the.
Oh, my bad. Thank you. Well, you're right. It's shomer. Thank you, Cindy. My eyesight clearly was not was impeded by something. Thank you. I will fix that. Well, that makes more sense because the Dalet looks just like the hey without the leg. Thank you. All right, we're gonna fix that right here. All right, so the hey and the resh. What was my question?
Sarah or Sarah.
Oh, what words end with? There we go.
Hey.
What words end with hey? So we say hey is silent at the end of a word, and it is vocalized in the middle. Debbie, what's an example?
Torah.
Thank you. That's a good one. We should all know that word. Torah. When you hear it, you think it's just Torah, like two sounds, a t and a r. And in fact, the Torah ends with a hey sound, and the hey is silent. Most words are going to be closed with either a consonant letter or a silent letter. Most words are closed, meaning if you look at the way a word is spelt, most of the time it doesn't end in a vowel sound. It usually ends with a letter that does not have a vowel underneath it. It is like it's closed up, right? The hey in the middle of a word or in the beginning of a word is vocalized, just like we in English don't pronounce, in American English, do not pronounce an H sometimes in the start of a word, like H-E-R-B. We would say herbs. In British English, they say herbs. And that is actually makes more sense because it's a letter and it's an H and it should be vocalized somehow, right? So same as in Hebrew, the hey, a good one is the name of God. We refer to God as Hashem, right? Hashem, the name is another way we refer to God. And Hashem will actually use all of the sounds that we've so far accrued, including the new sound that we're gonna look at today or re-look at today. Hashem, we don't say Hashem, and it's not like the French where the H is not pronounced at all. So remember that when you see it at the end of a word, you don't need to say Torah. It's very difficult to do and also not necessary. Something else about the letter hey is the letter hey is another, when we get to talking about masculine and feminine nouns, how do we distinguish a noun in either the group of masculine or the group of feminine? The hey is another indicator. Many words that end with a hey are going to be part of the feminine group. Torah, for instance, is a feminine word, meaning that when we look for adjectives to describe a Torah, they're going to be in the feminine form of the adjective. And if you speak another language, that makes sense. If you've never learned another language, that might be confusing. We don't need to get to it now. Something to keep in the back of your mind for later. Adria, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. Anyone else have a question about this stuff? No?
Not yet.
Okay, cool.
Give me a minute.
I'm giving you as long as you want for questions. All right, so we had.
Yeah, I have a question. What's going on in Georgia?
I wish I could answer that.
I'm sorry.
No, it's hilarious. Oh.
Not really.
God,
Okay.
it's not. It's Thursday and we don't know, but we're gonna be in our Hebrew zone, so we don't have to think about that for at least until 9:50.
Mia,
Georgia with a hey, right?
I'm sorry, I have a question. I know it's jumping ahead, but we did it last semester. When it's a cha, it ends in a. It's got a. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking about sometimes a word ends with a vowel like this, like
Yeah.
with an
Yeah,
I.
because you just said a word don't ends in vowels.
They generally don't. They generally don't, but there are exceptions, as everything, right? There is the ch sound that ends in the word sameach, and not even, and we'll get back to that, Lori. You're right. We did touch upon that last semester. And that's kind of an exceptional ending, and it's also pronounced in an exceptional way. So I'm going to put that thing onto like a little shelf. We're going to get back to it. But
Thanks.
thank you for pointing that out. I'm saying generally speaking because unless it's a conjugated word, and we're going to see this too, like you'll say, hey, you said that things don't end in a vowel sound. Usually the vowel endings, if a word ends with like Eloheinu, that is an oo sound at the end. That's a vowel sound. But the reason is because that ending of the word Eloheinu is a suffix, is a pronominal suffix. It implies possession. And the way we kind of conjugate certain grammatical forms, there are sounds that come at the end of a word, but they're a suffix ending. They're not really they're part of the word, but they don't inherently belong to the way that you spell that word. Again, keep that. If you get it, great. If you don't, keep it on a shelf. We'll come back to it. So the thing with this class, with the Alef Part 2 class, is that I am going to speak to the language a little bit more deeply than I did before, because I think now that we're reviewing things, I can add a little more information where before it was too much, right? Before that it was like, whoa, we're just learning how to like recognize the letter bet. I feel like at this point I can introduce some concepts. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay. It's still okay to still be confused a little bit by what I'm saying, with the knowledge that it's going to become clear as we move through the semester. Okay? All right, so Reish Hay, just going through the order of the book so that we're doing this in a succinct kind of way. I'm moving to page 21 on the bottom to talk about the dagesh. The dagesh, they don't call it a dagesh in this book, but I am going to introduce that word to you because it is, in fact, what we call the dot that appears inside Hebrew letters. So this is the word dagesh. It's on the bottom of page 21 if you want to look at the way the book explains it, and we could talk a little bit about that. This is, again, a concept that for a lot of people is challenging and strange, and I'm just going to review. Actually, I can ask one of you perhaps to explain what you know about this dot in the Hebrew letters. Taking the letter bet, for instance, if we have this dot, so we looked at the letter bet, obviously, right? We've done the letter bet. We look at the letter bet, and it has this dot in the center. What is that? What is that dot? And what does it do? And how does it change the way that we relate to this letter? Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, it's when it has the dot in the middle of the bet, it sounds like a B. When it doesn't have the dot in the middle of the bet, it sounds like a V.
Correct. So the dot in the center of the letter changes the vocalization of the letter, and that that dot is called a dagesh. I'm going to say a couple of different things about the dagesh, which may or may not resonate for you at this juncture, but again, it's okay. We'll come back to it again. The dagesh plays many different roles in Hebrew grammar and not just in grammar, but kind of in the vocalization of basic reading. So as we know, the vowel system was put onto the words post letters, right? After the letters were created, after we had an alphabet, the vocalization system came after that. Remember we talked about that last semester? I'll review it. Letters came first, vowels overlap that. The vowel system and the trope note system were all created by the Masorites I want to say, I think I had the date in my head once and now I've lost it, but it's definitely in the very early, like I want to say the 500s or the 600s, like a long time ago. And so biblical Hebrew kind of was a work in progress. The words appeared as letters and it was an oral tradition. So people kind of pronounced the words, in whatever way they felt that the word was pronounced. And then the standardization needed to happen because there were too many inconsistencies in the way people pronounced words. So the vocalization vowel system was imposed after the letters. I can get back to that again another point, but I want to go back to the dagesh for a second. So the dagesh, what it does is it transforms a letter, and we have these letters here, which is the bet gimel dalet chaf fe taf, and we call them in Hebrew beged kefet, which is basically just giving vowels to the letters, turning this into a word, beged kefet. And those letters represent the 6 letters in Hebrew that change if there is a dot put in them. You with me so far? Okay, so these letters, the bet, gimel, dalet, kaf, fe, taf, of those letters, I'm just going to highlight something in a different color for you so that you could see the difference. Of those letters, the only ones that now actually make a difference for us are these three. Bet, kaf, pe. These three letters are the ones that if we were to look at those letters in a textbook, we would see that those letters are going to be, the sound is going to change from a P to an F. Oh, this is a script version. That's not a print version. Sorry about that. I'm used to writing in print. All right, this is our block letter version. Here's the kaf, here's the pe, and here's the bet. These letters are dual letters. They have I think we had a technical term for this before, but I'm going to forget it. We have a hard sound and a soft sound for all of these letters. We have and I'll show you how this looks again, so we can just see this, and we'll review it when we get to the letters, but just to explain the dagesh. This is the dots. These are the hard sounds. The stop sounds. I think that's what it was. So we said b, k, p. These are the ones with the dots, with the dagesh. They're hard stop sounds. B, k, p. They're not continuous. And you'll see the difference. B versus v, k versus and p versus f. These are the kind of the two layers of how these letters function as dual letters. So the first of those we already saw was the bet, and we're going to learn the rest of them as we move on. But what you need to remember about these letters and these sounds is that if the dot is there, it changes the sound. It changes the sound of the word, not of the letter. And not only does it change the sound of the letter, it also, what it does is it creates certain dissonance in the sounds, meaning that if I have a combination of two consonant sounds that don't work together, sometimes I need to create a hard sound in order to pronounce a word. So I have laws and rules around when that dot goes into a word. I know that sounds very confusing, but I'll explain it with an example. I'm going to clear my scribbles for a second. So if you're taking notes, sorry, it's just getting very messy. Okay.
Could I just ask something?
Yes, but I'm gonna repeat everything I just said because I realize that I said a lot. Yes, please ask the question and then I'm happy to go back. Yeah.
Could you just differentiate again the kaf? Which one?
I'm gonna get to, we haven't learned it. We haven't learned it yet, so I'm not gonna go there, Sue, because that's not in this lesson. I'm going to talked about the dagesh. What I did was I talked about the dagesh by bringing in the example of the other letters, which we have not done yet. So hold your horses. We'll get there. So this dagesh is going to make the difference between the word mi chamocha and ein kelohenu. Mi chamocha and ein kelohenu. The same letter is used with the chamocha and kelohenu. But the dot in it is, you may ask yourself, well, why is it sometimes has a dot, sometimes it doesn't have a dot in a letter? There's a whole rule and regulation about when we use the dagesh. I would never teach that because it's way too complicated, and honestly, I don't always know what the rules are. Sometimes the rules are if certain letters are next to one another and they clash. So in English, imagine creating a word, we have blending consonant sounds, GR, CR, ST, right? Certain sounds that go together that you can actually make the sound, vocalize the sounds of certain consonants when they're blended. There are obviously certain consonants, like think about, I don't know, MG. Doesn't work. You can't blend those two sounds. It's very difficult, and it sounds kind of, right? It sounds kind of muddled. Versus gur, we can do that. We can make that sound. So Hebrew has the same kind of problems where you have letters next to each other. They don't really blend. And so the dagesh helps in certain cases to differentiate consonant sounds. And so the rules about when we use that dot are very complicated. All you need to do on your end is when you see a word, just be mindful of the dot and whether this is a letter that changes its vocalization with the dot. What did we say? How many letters do we have to mind ourselves of? 1, 2, 3. And you may ask yourself, what are the other ones? Well, what's going on with those letters, right? I see those faces. Some of you are saying, but Mia, what about those other 3 letters? And I will tell you about them, but briefly. The other 3 letters, Gimel, Daled, and Taf. And this one I'm going to circle because we already know a little bit about the Taf. If you guys were listening to our lesson about the Ashkenazi versus the Sephardic pronunciation, you might already know the answer. What are the 2 T sounds? Ooh, that was a terrible color to use. Sorry about that. What are the 2 T sounds that we talked about? We have our Shabbat, and we also have our Shabbos. So actually the T with a dot is a T, and without the dot is an S sound. And traditionally, if you listen to, if you put on any kind of recording of like a Chabad rabbi or an ultra Orthodox, well, not even, it could just be an Ashkenazi synagogue, anywhere in the world, and you follow along with what they're reading, when they get to a taf that doesn't have a dot in it, they will pronounce it like an S sound, as in bas mitzvah. So when I write the word bat, as in daughter, modern Hebrew, the word bat looks like this, right? And the taf does not have a dagesh in it. It doesn't. It's not spelt with a dot in the taf. So I, in my Sephardic / standard Hebrew pronunciation, would say bat, and most people would read that word as bat. If I take this to someone who reads with an Ashkenazi vocalization, they would read the word as bas. And at CBST, sometimes we do have Torah readers who pronounce the taf and saf. We don't, generally speaking. And again, standard Hebrew does not, we've cut that out. So when you see a taf that has a dot in it, you do not need to make, there's no difference in the sound of that. Questions about that?
Yes, I have a question.
Linda, yes.
I just want to clarify, which is something that I never noticed before, that bat, the word bat, is spelled without the dagesh in it. So there are words in Hebrew that don't apply when it comes to a dagesh to make the sound, the taf. So that's why you have that as a separate entity from the other 3. Because it very often doesn't include the dagesh to make the taf sound.
I'm not sure I understand whether you mean to say that at CBSE we don't make
I'm
distinction, or in
talking
general.
about Sephardic Hebrew.
Yeah. So well, let's call it, so the Sephardic, I mean, it might not be accurate to say that because there's a difference. I mean, we're just going to call it standard. We're just going to say modern standard. Yeah. In the standard pronunciation, there isn't that distinction between the t and the s.
Uh-huh.
And this is one of those 3. So traditionally and originally there was a difference between those letters. If we go to the Gimel and the Dalet, it's even stranger. And I'll just do a quick explanation of what the other 2 letters sounded like. So Linda, for our purposes, when you see a taf, it's a t. Like Torah is Torah. First of all, Torah has a dagesh. The word Torah has a dagesh, which is why no one ever says the Sora. That's just never said, because it's not, the letter is never without that dagesh in the word Torah. If I go to the Gimel and the Dalet, it's a little bit weirder, and because those sounds are entirely standardized, you'll see it when you look at a text. And I might just, before we leave, I might just show you a text from a Sidur, and you can see that dagesh in a lot of letters that you're like, whoa, that's weird. That doesn't really look like it belongs there. The Gimel and the Dalet. So this is my memory of the Gimel and the Dalet, were that there were two kinds of sound. So one, let's say, was the Gimel was a G, and the other one was maybe a more guttural G. So it was a G and then a R. And the Dalet too. The Dalet was a D sound, and this is an interesting one. So Dalet is just like regular Dalet, a D, and the other Dalet was like a th, a D. So again, the sounds of those letters have been kind of quashed, in the sense that now a Gimel is a Gimel, a Dalet is a Dalet. There aren't 2 versions of it. But that was a thing, because as we know, and this is not something I am at all inventing, language is a living thing, meaning that it goes through evolutions and transitions. And so if something was pronounced one way hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, even 50 years ago, and then that that changes, that makes sense. It's not any different than in any other language. It's just that in Hebrew, we have the kind of bonus of going back and looking at Hebrew as a biblical language, which is really, I mean, amazing that it transitioned from a biblical text to a Mishnaic text to a medieval text to what we now know as a modern language. And Hebrew was never spoken, right? Remember that Hebrew originally was not a spoken language; it was a read language, but no one spoke Hebrew. I don't know if you know that they read text in Hebrew, but they spoke the language that that they lived, that the countries that they lived in. So if it was Aramaic when they were living in Babylonia, or if it was later Arabic, or any number of languages based on the Jewish community. So Hebrew was not, it didn't have a standard until a lot later. If you put something in the chat, I cannot see it. So if you have a question, just call it out, or a comment, because unless it's not for me, which is fine too. I know that the chat box comes out. I just have a very hard time seeing it when I have something on my screen. So
I put in the chat
Yes.
that the dagesh is like a stop sign.
Oh, interesting. A dagesh is like a stop sign. I like that. And if that works, like
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just
I like
put that out as a possibility.
I like that. I like that. So the dagesh, what you need to remember is, for now, if it's in the bet, it's a b. If it's not in the bet, it's a v. So think about the sounds again. If you can make that distinction between a b being a stopped sound, right, and v being a continuous sound. Thank you.
What I put in the chat was just that in Greek there's a very guttural version of G.
Oh,
so the word gyro is not pronounced gyro. It's almost like gyro. It's way back in the throat.
Very interesting. Thank you, Simon. So I do think that the letters, especially those, the Gimel and the Daled, we know that we have guttural sounds in Hebrew, and in certain dialects of Hebrew, those guttural sounds are even more accentuated. And when we get to some of those, I'm going to point them out. We already kind of touched upon the difference between Aleph and Ayin when we get to those silent letters, like the guttural and the regular sound. But that makes sense because it all comes back to that same the vocalizations that we no longer have but existed in the language. I'm going to move on from the dagesh for now. It will come up again, but we're just going through. Next, the vowels. This also should be something that is reviewed for us. The we said are exactly the same sound in modern standard Hebrew, except for that when we look at the sound in the Ashkenazi pronunciation, this guy here, the two dots, is the same as the two dots with the yud. And I actually have another slide with the vocalizations of some of these. I don't know if I have this for today, or we're going to do this next time, but the what we call the diphthongs, right? The extension of some of the vowel sounds. So when you go from an to an a, that yud extender, and I think that this is this slide. I don't know that this is for right now. The and the a, the and the I. And we're going to go back and look at that again. But basically, in the way that we pronounce this particular vowel, the and the there are times when you can say a using that sound. If that's a preference for you to like pronounce the two dots as a and the three dots as that's entirely up to you. I mean, as long as you don't pronounce it o, that's fine. Just it's either it's or a. The two dots, the three dots are always The three dots are always The two dots depends on your preference and your own like what you consider to be your Hebrew. It varies. A lot of people will be like, that's to me and this is also Some people will say, nope, this guy here is a. And this one here is I'm not gonna make this into a thing because I know people have very strong feelings about it. Not sure why. It's a vowel, but yeah.
Mia?
Yes.
The extension, the EY.
I'm getting there. Yeah.
Right. I learned that as I.
There's no way you learn that as I, because there is an I, and the I looks like this.
No. At the end of the word, we pronounced it. I think it was Jack Greenberg that taught us that it was pronounced I, not A.
That's odd. Okay. Do you have an example of a word that
I can't think of anything right now, but I will. We
Okay,
talked
well,
about
let
this
me
in
know.
the, we
I,
talked about this in the when I joined the
choir?
the the study group.
This
Because
is okay. Yeah, Linda, I'm curious, and I would love to hear about what that is. If you have an example to bring back, maybe on next week, we've got
right,
the weekend.
right.
If not,
Okay.
I can do a little research. But to be honest, there is an I sound, but the I sound requires an ah vowel. And then the yud extends that, but this one with the two dots is definitely not an I sound, unless there's a specific word that perhaps is pronounced like that. And I'll show you why.
Maybe it was the vowel with the yud
That's
that
definitely
going.
likely. That's more likely, and we'll
Got
get
it.
back to that. We'll get back to that in just a second. But thank you for pointing that
Okay.
out. Thank you for pointing
Thank
that out.
you.
So if we look at this again, we said that we've got an e and an as our s sounds straight up, like sefer, the word for book, sefer, or melech. You know the word melech, king or sovereign, right? So that's our s sound, straight up e. If I wanted to create the sound a, like as B'nai Yisrael, right? And that's one word that we get all the time, right? Or Shomrei Shabbat, or well, there's a million words that we can come up with that have that a sound at the end. That is created with an e plus a yud. The yud we haven't learned as a letter. Well, we have, but not in this review. The yud is like the letter y, and therefore it becomes kind of this. It acts as a vowel extender. That's my own thing. A vowel extender. I don't think that that's like a legitimate, grammatical thing to say, but whatever. We have an e, and we add the yud to it. Therefore, so if we have an s sound, well, think about that. We've got an s sound, and then we add a yud to a y to it. So I have a. Again, it looks kind of weird with an h in there, but you get the point. And some Hebrew readers will say that these two are the same. The e and the a to them is the same. So when you see, if you want, again, if that's something that's important to you to pronounce it like an a sound, go for it. No one's going to say you're pronouncing it incorrectly. What they would say is you're not pronouncing it in the modern standard Hebrew, and that's totally fine too. In a Siddur, there's oftentimes modern standard Hebrew doesn't really apply because we're dealing with a language that's way older than the modern Hebrew equivalent. So when you're reading a menu, it's not going to sound the same as when you're reading from the prayer book. We all know that already. E and A. All right, questions about that? Okay. The other part of that was, we covered that, Sephardic and Ashkenazic dialects. That's also in the book if you want to read about that. And writing the name of God in the Torah and the Siddur. So this is another thing that I think some of you might already be aware of, but just to be mindful of. So on page 28, there is a whole page about how do we use the name of God, how do we write the name of God, and I imagine at this point in your studies of Siddur, in your participation in prayers, you probably are already aware of this. Something interesting is that the Yud He Vav He, which is generally the form of God that we see, that is the unpronounceable name of God. Where is that found more often? Where is the Yud He Vav He found? Where do we see examples of that more frequently than other places? The answer is yes. I hear someone unmuting themselves. What's the answer?
The rabbi said when we were reading Psalms, when you say Lord, it's Yud He Vav He as opposed to Elohim or Adonai, or it's the God.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think that's what she said, if I got that right.
No, that's it. I mean, the what's interesting about the word, obviously the name God, and thank you for sharing that, Lori. you know, the translation is the problem with it, obviously, because if we were looking at the text, you know, in its Hebrew base form, we wouldn't really be translating it. We wouldn't need to translate it because it would appear as it is. The Yud He Vav He, you know, that name of God appears for the most part in the Torah, in biblical texts. It's very much a Torah expression of the unpronounceable name of God. So if you're looking at a Torah text, anytime you see Vaidaber Adonai El Moshe, like in God spoke to Moses, it's always Yud He Vav He. That name of God is what's written in the Torah. And then sometimes there are other mentions of Elohim. And so you have then that I think is what, Lori, what you're talking about. There's like the Yud He Vav He, and then there's the Lord, and then there's the actual God name. And those vary within the Torah. One thing that you can write, Yud He Vav He, obviously no one ever writes because there's obviously a lot of gravity to the name, to the 4-letter name. And so in place of saying Yud He Vav He, people will say Elohim, and Elohim is actually, if you don't know this, you might already know, Elohim just means God. It's kind of like not the generic, but it's not a specific. It's just kind of the noun of God, Elohim, and it's actually in the plural form, which is you can ask Rabbi Kleinbaum about that. There's all kinds of ideas and mystical explanations for why God takes the plural form in Hebrew. But what I want you to note is that when you see Yud He Vav He in a prayer book, usually, and this is not always the case, but usually that section of the prayer book has been lifted from the Torah. That's a kind of an indicator of how old the prayer is. More commonly, when we look in a prayer book in a siddur, you're going to see how is God expressed in the prayer book in a siddur versus the Torah. Does anyone have any thoughts about that, or what you can look at the text yourself? I mean, on page 28, it's not really a test. It's more a
usually like 2 yuds.
2 yuds. Yes, very nice. Thank you. 2 yuds. Yeah. So the 2 yuds is generally what the siddur, what the prayer book uses as its placeholder. Now, interestingly, we'll say Adonai in both. You know, we'll still use that generic form of God because, you know, we're not actually able, or we're not able to pronounce the name. So the Yud is interesting because when you see that, sometimes in a prayer, when you say Baruch Ata Adonai, when you look at a prayer, it's the Yud. It's not the Yud He Vav He. So sometimes people are like, why is it written like this sometimes and like that sometimes? So keep your eyes open for when you see the name of God, what the context is for when the name of God is used. And I think that's another interesting kind of thing to keep your eyes peeled for. And then it says here, the idea of Hashem. Hashem. Do we know what the word Shem means? Shem, Hashem Sheli, my name.
The
Hashem,
name.
the name, Nachon. So when I say Hashem, I'm basically saying the name. We now think of the word Hashem. Oh, Hashem, Baruch Hashem. You know, we think about Hashem as being a concept. In fact, it's actually a noun, which means literally the, Shem, name, the name. Right? And when you break that down to like what it actually means, it kind of, there's a whole other level of, oh my goodness, when we say Baruch Hashem, blessed is the name. That's what we're saying. Baruch, blessed, Hashem is the name. The word is doesn't exist in the present tense in Hebrew. So when I say, you know, Ani, I am, Ani Mia, I don't need to say I am, I just say Ani, in the same way that I say Baruch Hashem, blessed Hashem, Baruch Hashem, blessed is the name. Strange, right? When you break that down to what it really means. No, that's what we're saying. Okay, I think we've come to the end of chapter 3. Any questions about that before we move on? I realize we have 4 minutes, but we can start chapter 4 review. Questions? If you have any, call them out. If not, we are going to go on to the next delightful slide. Next slide is pink, and it is chapter 4. There it is. Okay. Chapter 4 begins on page 29, as it says on the top. We didn't look at the word shomer, which was the root word for chapter 3, to guard and keep. And of course, shomer Shabbat was the phrase that they gave us, someone who keeps or guards the Sabbath, meaning someone who someone who keeps Shabbat, shomer Shabbat. All right, chapter 4. We're looking here at a couple of different things. Oh, this is the fun one. This is the one we were talking about, the shava, which I think took us quite a bit of learning, the vowel of how to pronounce this shava. So I have brought back some of our learning tools from last time. We're all going to have such a great time looking at that again. Natan is our root for this one. Noten haTorah, the giver of the Torah, right? Natan, Asher Natan Lanu, who has given us Torat Emet, the Torah of truth. Natan is a good one. As you can see, I wrote it out as Nun Taf, final Nun, though, as we know, we're going to repeat what we already said on Tuesday. The root letters does not matter. It doesn't matter whether it is a final or a regular letter. It doesn't matter whether there is a dot in the bet or not in the bet. What is important to us is the essence of the letters, right? So the fact that it's a final letter is just because it looks nicer to do it like this rather than put a regular case nun rather than a final nun at the end, but it doesn't need to look like that. And a lesser, they teach us the Shema. I don't know why I put a shin there with a dot. I usually don't do the dots in the roots, but for whatever reason it's there. So Shema, Shomea Tfilah, the hearer of the prayers, or Shema Yisrael was a little other additional vocab that they gave us, another root. And here we go. We are going to take a look at the letters of this chapter, which appear to be right here, the nun, the final nun, the aleph, and the ayin. All right. I think we're gonna, oh shoot, it's already 9:49. Ugh, all right, so nun, final nun. Here we go, here's nun, here's final nun, same letter. When it reaches the end of the line, it is longer and hangs below. And aleph and ayin. So aleph and ayin we talked about before. At this point, they should be familiar to you at least. We have these two letters that are, what did we say about these letters? They're silent, but they serve a very important purpose. What do they do?
Placeholders. What's
another way for saying they're not exactly placeholders? That is so close. They function as anchors. That's it. They're anchors. So they're not placeholders because there's nothing that's supposed to go there. They belong there. But what they're doing is they're anchoring the vowel, because without them, you cannot vocalize a vowel sound on its own. Every vowel needs a letter to hold it. And that's what the aleph and the ayin are. We're going to stop there because we are going to stop on time. So those of you who came late, please be mindful. Next week, Tuesday, we will be beginning the class as close to 9 o'clock as possible. I'm going to say 9:02 max, and then we start, and the room is going to be locked at 9:10. That's what I got to say. Have a wonderful weekend. May we all be blessed with a good and good results. Take care of yourselves. Have a great Psalms class. See you next week. Ciao.